Everybody, Mama Liz here again. Yes, it's still cold. Yes, I still have on headgear. Deal with it. It's chilly in Tennessee right now. I had a lot of people ask me about learning to identify narcissistic traits in children. And that's kind of a twofold question. Number one, yes, you can see certain traits and behaviors that appear that should be red flags that you should, as a parent, kind of go, okay, I need to check on this. But also, on the other side of it, that falls into a paranoid personality disorder spectrum. And personality disorders are not applied to people until after 18 years of age. They're not even really supposed to kind of start monitoring for them as like life-altering behaviors that affect quality of life until mid-teens, just to even make note of them so that a diagnosis may come later if necessary. So while we are very aware that certain traits can present in children, we also know that the brain is changing every day with children. Until after the age of 18, we do not want to lay down a personality disorder diagnosis because it can entrap someone into a world that they may not be in if they're diagnosed too young, because the brain is still forming, it's still shaping, it's still reshaping. Myelination has not occurred where it solidifies its skills and known behaviors and traits that it will default to throughout life. So we don't want to apply a personality disorder too soon because they may just be going through a phase or a growth spurt or some kind of imbalance due to the chemical hormonal changes that they're going through, and it doesn't actually mean that they have this personality disorder. It just means that they are not functioning at a higher level, and therefore you're seeing more of the issues, more of the hindrances that it can create in their life and in their social skills and in their family relations. But it doesn't mean that that child is going to necessarily grow into this personality disorder. It just means they're exhibiting some red flags. So we don't like to diagnose. We're really hesitant to diagnose anything truly young. I'm kind of appalled at how young they will actually throw an ADHD diagnosis on a child when there's still so much formation occurring in the brain. Now, the brain forms from the brainstem forward, and here you have the more primary, primal life urges that takes care of things that you don't think about: your breathing, your functioning, your bowels, your just autonomy of life skills, or just in your stem. And as you move forward, the last thing to solidify is your frontal lobe, which is where your social skills and your social interaction skills are held. So how you relate to society and how you absorb society and perceive society is not truly embedded in you and worked. You know, you don't work that puzzle yourself until your later years. And for girls, it stops around age 22, 23. For boys, around age 20, 23, 25. And they're kind of stuck in those social skills and in that perspective that they've created at that time. Now, can you change after that? Yes, it takes a lot of work, but you can. But that's about the ages to where our brains become fully formed. So it's slow going. And then the last thing is social skills. A lot of people don't understand that. That's why a lot of people that have frontal lobe injuries lose their ability to kind of have some sympathetic responses to social dynamics. They get a little bit more crass if you have a frontal lobe injury because you just don't have those social skills that you need sometimes for some more of the sympathetic responses that we may give as human beings. But for children, you can start to look at behaviors. As research has been done, we can go back and we can say that there are troubled personalities that sometimes do grow into the narcissistic paranoid personality disorder. It doesn't always, but sometimes these things do seem consistently found in children that present early with red flags and then grow into these disorders. And it's usually seen in kids. The largest population of which are in positions to need a child advocate. Why? Because a lot of the children's behavior at a young age, especially through late grade school through high school, a lot of those red flags are represented by defiant behavior. So you may get a kid that someone may say, oh, is this oppositional defiance disorder? Is this ADHD? Is this something worse that we need to possibly be looking at in the future? So parents get really concerned when they start to see this kind of defiant nature in their children. And it ends up a lot of time with parents trying to put down rules, children going, nope, I ain't following those rules, and completely trying to send the family in orbit by restructuring the family to where they lead the family. So you get a child in the position of leader, and the family is constantly trying to make it work, and this child is just not going to allow any kind of guidance, any kind of compliance to rules or order. They're very, very much aware that when they flip that power and they have that power, that then the world heeds to them. And that normally ends up with the parents being called into family court, because the child will tell someone that they're being mistreated. Even they may not be being mistreated, but in their mind they're being mistreated because they're not being heeded completely, 110%. And then you get, they may tell a teacher or a trusted adult, and then you get a report, and then you get agencies, and it turns into a big deal in family court. And many parents are normally, they normally have their cases dismissed after a good investigation, because they start to understand that this child not only has those traits with their parents, but with school officials, with siblings, with students in their schools. They have that kind of defiant relationship with everyone. And there is usually never any proof of any abuse. And so then they normally get referred to therapy, and the parents go to a parenting class. And it normally ends up being beneficial, but it is a headache. But many of those kids that you see in those predicaments are normally kids that exhibit most of the primary red flags for these behaviors. Boy, I've got a rooster tail going on up there, don't I? That's sexy. Okay, back to, I don't care. Y'all love my hair? It does its own thing. Okay, so when you see a kid who is like constantly accusing random people, family, students, constantly saying they're downtrodden, they're being attacked, they're being mistreated, but you also see them in other circles being talkative and easy to like, and being very, very loose with the personal information, and they're just full of confidence and just, exaggeration of confidence and skills. And then you see them in another set and they're demure, and I'm being mistreated, and you're not. Okay, that is a child that is learning to become what each social circle needs for them to be in control. That is a red flag for parents. Not necessarily, that they're going to end up with a narcissistic personality, or they're going to end up with any kind of paranoid personality disorder. That's just a red flag to know that your child is not using society as a consistent tool. They're using themselves as a tool to manipulate the society they're within at the moment. So they're taking society and they're putting it into little microcosms of groups of people, and then they're going into those separate groups and being what they need to be to control each separate group. So they adopt a different version of themselves for each group so that they can manipulate each group. That is a red flag. If you have children do that, pay attention. Possibly just talk to somebody as a heads up, because that is a pretty dominant trait in kids that are going to really struggle with socialization, especially in high school. If you use art therapy, which is really great, like if you have a kid that you're concerned about that they may be a little manipulative, or they may have a very unhealthy ego, or they have a very unhealthy view of themselves in comparison to their family and their loved ones, ask them to draw a picture. Ask them to draw a picture of their family and their loved ones. See how they draw the picture. There are some things that will come through. A lot of kids that have some of these red flags for these personality traits that we kind of know as research link to and sometimes grow into narcissistic personalities. They will draw themselves very big, very detailed, take a lot of time, but everyone else will be plain stick figures and smaller. That shows an emphasis on self. That shows a profound I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this because it's about children. It shows a profound ego that has not yet quite learned that accurate perspectives of society should have us all on the same level. They have not learned that they are not the big kahuna, that they do not get everything that they demand, that they do not rule the world. They have a very bloated sense of self. That's the nicest way I can say. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully today. If they don't get their demands, they'll go into tantrums. And when you ask them a specific family question, they will often allude to like having demands not met that they've never voiced or that they've hidden, or that you can see would cause a great emotional issue. Like if you talk to a kid and say, well, you know, what's a wish that you never had met? And they may go back and say, I wish that my aunt had never died in a car wreck when she was 25 because she was my favorite aunt and she spent the most time with me. Okay, ding, ding, ding. We've got a kid that's not emotionally composting what's going on. We've got a kid that doesn't feel like they can talk this through with their family, so they've kept that in their, in their little bodies, and it's just kind of ground into this concern, trouble. I didn't get this need met, so now when I go into relationships, I'm going to control because I know what it's like to not have my needs met and have people disappear. So they overcompensate and they control. But it also shows that there's some emotional harm going on there. And that can be a deep-seated issue, because if we don't learn to process the world effectively, then we can process it so ineffectively that we have these absolute, like, flawed assumptions of what society and life and family should be. And if we don't correct those assumptions, we will go through life with those flawed assumptions and feeling that everyone is biased. It will create headaches, conflict, when really there's no need. It's a flawed assumption. We've got to correct that assumption. If you have a kid that has trouble sleeping, trouble being alone, inability to see others' viewpoints, inability to understand that other people have cognitive skills that they use that are different than their cognitive skills, these are things that they struggle to understand because they're so fixated on their bias that they can't understand there is another bias out there, but they apply their bias across the board. And it really does create a barrier with developing and interacting with society. Now, there are certain traits that adults and children show when they have some of these tendencies. If a kid is overstressed or an adult is overstressed, then they will overcompensate with control. And that will turn into some of these red flags for potentially creating a narcissistic personality. If they exploit people, if they use people, manipulate them for personal gain, watch out. Kids and adults. Kids can do it too. You know kids can do that. They make ridiculous demands. They don't apologize for their behavior. They twist the truth to validate themselves and their behavior. They want others to apologize for their behavior. They refuse to apologize for their behavior. Will not discuss any flaws that they may think that they have. They feel attacked when somebody else wants to do it. And if someone does address their behavior, they often respond as if they have been physically attacked rather than just verbally questioned. Now that's children and adults. That's kind of the same across the board. Great things to look for. And it's strange that they're exhibited by both age gaps so profoundly and so concretely. It's just like, wow, that really stuck and just grew with that person. So a kid that feels that they spent their childhood being insecure, that they didn't get their needs met, or they weren't socialized appropriately, these are kids that are going to overcompensate in life. They're going to have those flawed assumptions. They're going to have those biases that they don't understand that other people have as well. They just fixate on their own. And that can create, especially in a child that has those bias, that has the bias, that overcompensates, that has flawed assumption and has those traits, it can create thinking errors, cognitive errors. in that child, which can then slow down the socialization skills and just basic understanding of sympathy, empathy, love, respect. You know, these things are very difficult to train someone to understand if they don't have the natural association with the feelings themselves. And many times they don't, because they only feel their bias, and their bias is normally very detached and very, very much on the self-bloated, ego-driven side, and not the sincere, apologetic, concerned side that many people, you know, have when they interact with others. The best way to help your children avoid some of these pitfalls or avoid some of these personality traits, or help them retrain out of these personality traits, is teach them the value of giving. Make sure that you always show a child the value of giving to others, helping others, but also the benefit you receive emotionally from helping others. Help them see a well-rounded picture of giving. Give them chores and responsibilities. Praise them for when they do something responsible, even if it's as small as putting their shoes where the shoes go when they take them off. If it's as small as attempting to spread up their bed in the morning. Praise responsibility. Praise it. We want to train them that responsible things are good things to do, that we get positive reinforcement when we do these positive things. Use active listening. So let them speak. Listen. Observe them speaking. Actively listen to every word they say, and when you respond, make sure that you say their words back to them and state, did I understand this? You said blah, 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 blah. Yes. Okay, to me that means this. Is that correct? Start to actively give them feedback. Use their words and then say, okay, to me that means this. And let them understand that I'm trying to compost this. I'm trying to understand this. And see, you may say it this way, but I may get it this way. Role model that behavior so that they understand. We digest information and it hits everyone differently. But respond and use their words back to them. And look for them to either say yes or no. It really helps with communication, because if you say the words back and they go, that's not what I meant at all. Okay, well, those are your words, so let's throw those out. You go pick a new sentence and tell me a new sentence and see if we can move on from there. Sometimes they do not understand how they're communicating until it's laid point blank in front of them or used toward them themselves. Always display empathy. Always understand that emotional intelligence is basically understanding how other people feel. Emotional intelligence is not being aware of how we feel. No, that's just like akin to being in this skin soup here. You're always feeling something of your own, whether you compost it correctly or incorrectly. But to understand that other people feel is true emotional intelligence. Don't reason with them. Listen. Actively listen. Use their words and respond. Thank them when they do a desired behavior or desired task or something responsible. Stay calm at all times, showing them that the breakdown into chaos is not necessary. Therefore, they will go into chaos less themselves. And always stress to them that good overcomes bad. Because with some of those very self-centered ways of viewing the world, it's very easy to get fixated on the negative in others. So if we always role model, be present and be aware of the goodness of everything. People, the earth, the meal you just had, the job you have, the friends you have, the clothes you wear, the shoes you got to buy last week. There's goodness. Be positive. Focus on the good things. This will help that child learn to look at the world in a more positive way. They are still learning. That's why we don't want to diagnose them. The brain is still forming. Chemicals and hormones are still floating around and they're making changes. It's still rearranging their rooms up here. So we don't want to lay a burden, as in a diagnosis, upon them that may keep them into a little box and not allow them to grow. Because if they think there is something wrong with them, they may shut down and not attempt to grow. But if we just sit back and go, okay, we know this is possibility that they have these behaviors and it may grow into this. If we just sit back and we role model and we interact appropriately and we make sure to be consistent and we start to pull them out of themselves and into a more socialized, into a more empathetic, sympathetic, social being, then they probably will grow out of many of those trouble behaviors you're seeing. Very rarely are kids so poorly behaved in a young age that a therapist will look at them and go, I'm going to see them in 8 years and this is what they're going to have. Very rarely, because children change so much every day. Literally, when they wake up every day, they're a different person because of everything going on in their brains and their bodies. So be kind to your children, but be appropriate. Understand that they are learning every day, and because every day is a new day for their brain, you have to be on your game every day to show them the best game you've got, because we don't want them to fall through the cracks and go to that negative place where, you know, some of those negative traits, skills, and negative socialization inadequacies and assumptions could create something that heeds them toward a paranoid personality disorder later in life. We don't want that to occur. But we don't diagnose until after 18, even though we can see red flags, we can see behaviors and actions that we need to be concerned about. It should not be like this big fearful moment that, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with my child. Your child is growing, your child is learning, your child is processing. There's nothing wrong with your child. Simply, actively investigate, ask questions about school teachers, how they're interacting with friends, ask friends' parents they spend time with. Really get to know your child. I know parents go, I know my child. No, get to know your child on the basis of how they interact with society when they're away from you. Get to know your child. And pay attention. And then role model on these positive things, these positive traits rather than the negative. And many times you can almost always correct any behavior in the kids. But it takes consistency, it takes staying calm, and it takes a very actively aware parent that is not only aware of the child's behavior, but aware of their behavior and how they respond. So I hope that helped. Now you know. Yes, there are red flags that we can look at. Yes, there are personality traits we can be concerned with, but no, we don't diagnose until after 18. But if your parent's struggling, here's some things that you may want to monitor for and potentially change to have a better outcome for your child when they grow up. Apply it to your life as you see fit. And of course, this doesn't replace actually seeing a clinical professional in the therapeutic setting. This is just my advice because I'm not billing anyone anymore and I'm not counseling anymore. I'm sitting at my kitchen table freezing my honey off today because it's snowy in Tennessee. If at any time you think you have an issue too big